I'll talk a little bit about change in effect, but change for the worse, I think, or at least change that's threatening us. I'm not going to dwell on the wonders of the new technologies. Tom did that with a vengeance. But I want to look at these two major threats or concerns that I have about the impact of the new technologies. You know, we live in a world where we look at symptoms and we don't look at causes, and I think it's awful. It just permeates everything. Causes have been dropped. Symptoms are the focus all the time. My concerns are two. One is for the practice of management that Peter Drucker so gloriously described, and the other is the state of our organizations and the future of our societies. And I want to talk about two tendencies that concern me. The first is that in my research and in lots of other research that came to the same conclusion, managerial work is hectic. It's inevitably and intrinsically hectic. It's action-oriented. It's full of interruptions. It's just an action-driven kind of activity. It's hard to sort of step back and reflect in that kind of job. And I described that in my book of 1973, long before any of these changes came about, but so did other people. Sune Carlson in the late 40s studying Swedish managing directors and so on. My concern is that some of the new technologies, and I'm referring particularly to email, but also some other aspects of internet, are making a hectic job frenetic. And I think frenetic is driving a lot of managers over the edge. In the sense that they lose control of their job, they lose control of any sense of being able to step back and so on. It was never a job in which planning or thinking ahead was easy, but now if you get really captured by the new technologies, and particularly email, and very eloquently described in the last panel, then you could be in very deep trouble. And I think a lot of managers are in deep trouble, and the consequence is that a lot of organizations are in deep trouble. And a lot of, you can't sustain it if you're in a highly competitive business, but let's be honest, a lot of older businesses, like banking and a lot of other things, still are to a certain degree oligopolistic, if not monopolistic. In fact, there's a kind of a tendency in that direction. I realize there's another side to that story, but I don't think we can ignore that. When management goes over the edge, we kind of lose touch with what's going on, and if managers have to do anything, they have to be in touch with their own organizations, their clientele, all kinds of other things. But to the extent that they're sitting at a keyboard or an iPhone or something, the only thing they're in touch with is a keyboard. The only thing they're in touch with is the physical technology. They're not physically or emotionally or intrinsically in touch with the kind of people and things that they have to be in touch with. In other words, management is essentially a face-to-face, interactive kind of activity, albeit supported by the new technologies, which are important. But we can't lose it. You know, the one thing I've never seen anybody study, although there probably have been studies that I don't know about, is distraction. I think distraction is a huge force in the world today. There was a study done in a major hospital system about why nurses sometimes pick the wrong medications and can kill people, and so the conclusion was, put different colors on different medications and all those things. The nurses in one of the hospitals took it upon themselves to find out, and they discovered that it was all about distraction. In the middle of picking meds, somebody would come along and ask them a question about a patient or something, and next thing you knew, they were picking the wrong medication. Well, there's a lot of distraction in management today. There's a lot of distraction in everything today. I think the technologies are driving many of us completely nuts at home in that second life, or the first life. It's really for many people the second life. Work is often the first life, but I think doing a lot of harm. The second point I want, and I think the distraction detaches managers from what they're managing, and that's the danger. The second thing, in line with the first, is the state of our organizations, and the fact that the new digital technologies are about networks. And networks are not communities, and communities are key to communities are key to creativity, they're key to innovation, they're key to effective organizing. And I don't just mean geographic communities, I mean that effective organizations run as communities of human beings. They don't run as collections of human resources. I think the term human resource is the worst term we've ever come up with. I'm not a human resource. I'm not human asset, and I'm certainly not human capital. I'm a human being, and that kind of reduction of ourselves is part of kind of what's going on today. If you want to know the difference, if you want to understand the difference between a network and a community, try and get your Facebook friends to help you paint your house. Okay, you'll find out quick enough what the difference is. And communities are key to how organizations work. We need networks. Obviously, we've always needed networks. Now we need electronic networks, or we need connections that are purely electronic. Obviously, any organization would be foolish to ignore that. But we also need organizations to function as communities. And that means making sure we keep the digital technologies in their place, which is not everywhere and everything, and this kind of obsessive overemphasize that, it's all about the new technologies and going to take over. That doesn't help. It really doesn't help to hear things that way. It's got to be put in perspective. Every technology has to be put in perspective. And so as I see organizations evolving, I see them as kind of network communities, that there are clusters of people who are doing the innovation, who are carrying out the projects, who are doing the new kinds of things, but they're doing it face-to-face. They're interacting face-to-face, and then they're kind of networked electronically or however. Sort of working on a project in Bangalore and working on a project in Silicon Valley, and there are communities working at each end who are networked in order to pass it over, from one day overnight to the next and so on. So that's the way I see it.
Okay, great.